Hey guys, Ariel over here at Nyth. I am working on putting a bunch of my herbs into storage for the winter. Hung a lot of things up here before it started snowing to dry. Everything's good and brittle dry now. So somebody asked how I process my herbs. What I want to end up with is the light will show it there. That's a dill weed, finely powdered in there. But I'm starting out with something long and on the stem. I already got the dill mostly done here, but got a bunch of stems. There we go. Pulled them apart. I just put them in this little old sieve, which was my grandma's, and kind of gently crush them, shake it up just a little bit, kind of stir it around, and anything that is the nice fine little flavorful leaves. Right now the whole house smells like dill and elderberry juice, which I was just making, will fall through. So then on top there I've got fairly coarse stuff, and underneath here I've got nice fine stuff. I'm just going to decide that's good enough. Toss that coarser, bigger leaves or stems into my compost bin, and the fine stuff is there's my first batch, and I'm going to put the rest in there, and that should be enough dill weed to last me for the rest of the year. And that is pretty much how I do all of my herbs. I'm going to go through here and do the same with oregano and parsley and so on. I'll show you guys a little bit of that. Okay, now I'm working on the dill seed. See if that'll show up there. One reason to grow your own versus just store-bought is a lot of, store-bought herbs are tend to sit on shelves and in packaging for a long time. To use the freshest first and not take up too many different jars in my spice counter, I'm going to dump out, I've just got an old dill seed bottle here. I'm going to dump out the old stuff, put this in first, and then put the oldest back on top just so that gets used first. But see if I do a little pinch of this stuff over beside here, show you the difference in color between herbs that are freshly dried and herbs that might have been sitting on a grocery store shelf for a while. You can see how brown the one is. Working on herbs today because it is gray and rainy out there. I don't know if the camera picks up the raindrops or not. You can see them falling off the edge of the roof. Just kind of drizzly. It snowed the last few days, but today's just kind of a cold rain. So anyway, that's why I'm in here working on herbs. Now I've got sage, so let me show you from the start here. I've got my whole bundle, just put a rubber band around it to dry it. I like the rubber bands because as the stems shrink as they dry, if you tie them with something that's not stretchy, you tend to have stems, falling out and stuff drop on the ground. So rubber band's just nice because it kind of tightens up as the stems shrink. So I'm going to just, kind of crumble, because this stuff's all nice and crispy dry now. Just crumble with my fingers. This is sage. This was a yellow, kind of yellow variegated sage, whose name I don't remember. And this little bunch will probably be plenty, because sage is not an herb that I use a whole lot. So I'm just, again, going through the bunch. Not even going to loosen all the stems for something like this, because I can crumble off the leaves, pretty much leaving the stems on there. This won't work until it's really good and dry. But with having a wood stove in here, getting things good and dry is no problem at all, even when it's raining outside. So there I've got, the majority of the leaves out of there. So that's kind of just stem. That's going to go over in my compost pile. And then I'm going to take the leaves and really just kind of crush them up. If you want to make your whole house smell like herbs, this is the way to do it. And you could use any kind of little filter or sieve or nothing at all if you don't mind having a few more pieces of stem and stuff in there, which for none of these things would really hurt you. It's just if you get a bigger chunk of stem in a bite of food, it can be a little tough and chewy. Now, sage kind of crumbles differently than some things, but there you can see down underneath, there we go, how I'm getting fine sage crumbled down in my bowl. So this is just a double stack, my grandma's old colander and a stainless steel bowl. And so I'm just gonna put the camera down because I'm gonna shake it all around, but keep kind of doing this, rattling around until I've crushed all the good little bits of leaves through there, and then I'll put them in a jar. Got some tarragon now. It's already started crushing this, but it's kind of a long, skinny leaf. There, give it to focus. It's got a really cool smell. It almost smells kind of sweet. I love smelling it when I'm crushing it up like this. It's another one I don't use a ton of in cooking, so I've just got one little bunch here. I only had one tarragon plant out there to cut and dry it from. Now I cut all these herbs, just snipped them off with the scissors and hung out to dry a couple weeks ago when it first started snowing and frosting here, so that if we got a real hard freeze that actually made a lot of these things go, you know, totally black, some of them can handle some good frost. So I still have some fresh little leaves growing out there that I'm picking for a lot of things, but I wanted to make sure I got some preserved for the winter. So there you can see how I kind of crush all the fines through my little sieve setup. I'm going to say the rest of that's pretty big. Under there's my fine stuff. And this stuff smells amazing. Dump this over here in my trash pile. And there I've got tarragon for a year. There we go. Smells just lovely. You guys can see some of the bottles. I keep empty glass bottles like this to reuse. That one says poultry seasoning, but that's the one I just put tarragon in. And you could get some fancy labeling system, but I don't usually. So I just grab my roll of duct tape and label this. Got tarragon. I've got the one that says dill weed is actually purple basil. It's not something I grow a lot of, but I actually had a neighbor who grew some and she didn't like the flavor of it, so I said, well, if she was going to throw it in the compost, I would eat it. And this one doesn't necessarily go in the herb category, but that is mint. It's a mixture of spearmint and peppermint, and I will use that for making teas because mint is my favorite tea. So I just write my labels on the duct tape. Let to focus there. Somehow you can see that. And gonna just use the scissors because it's hard to, at least I have a hard time tearing duct tape in real neat small pieces. So I'll just cut my labels here before I forget what's what. That's not poultry seasoning, that's tarragon. This is not dill weed, it is now purple basil. Like I said, I tend to keep nice little glass jars like this. If it's a plastic jar that I get something in, I usually throw those out just because I don't prefer to store things in plastic, but the glass ones I like to keep. And I've got mint. So that's how I store my spices. Then I've got more to do here, but I'll show you where those are going. Never seen my kitchen tour or any of my cooking videos. This is my spice cabinet on the back of my pantry door. That's for the little jars. Then if it's not too dark in here, which, there we go, you can see that whole row to clear at the back end. If they're lined up right, you can kind of read all the labels of all the different herbs I've got. I guess I better not block the light. Anyway, so in the bigger jars go a lot of the things I use a ton of, like basil and dill. And then the smaller jars are things I just don't use quite as much of. And I've still got some more herbs to do. Still working on my herbs here, guys. It's still a rainy kind of gray day. The sun will poke through for just a minute, but at least it's not snowing today. We have had a lot of snow the last couple weeks. Gonna have to pause this here shortly to go get some elk meatloaf in the oven because I've got a friend coming over for dinner. I tend to eat mostly elk around here as far as meat because that's what is available to harvest on the property where I live. But anyway, I've got trying to get my herbs finished up here. This can be a little time consuming for sure, but if you guys ever go to the grocery store and buy a bunch of bottles of herbs, and if you put herbs in a lot of your cooking, and you cook a lot, all of which applies to me, you go through quite a bit, and they're pretty expensive. And as I mentioned earlier when I showed you the difference in how brown the store-bought stuff was compared to my dill, you know, a lot of stuff really does end up sitting around in storage for quite a while, and so it's just not very fresh. And usually the flavor and nutrition and everything is much better when it is fresh. So for those reasons, it's worth taking the time to do. It does save me some money. I like growing the herbs anyway, and the whole house smells amazing. If you've got a rainy day where you're inside, it's nice and cozy. If you hear an occasional crackle, that would be the wood stove down there. It's mostly burned out because the house is toasty. I probably won't put more wood in it till tonight, but it keeps it quite cozy in here. And the whole house smells like a whole mixture of herbs. If you're hearing the other little noise in the background, I am running the generator to top off the battery bank. That's something that I'd have to do every now and then here with living off-grid in my tiny house. And this time it was necessitated by the fact that it has rained and snowed for almost 2 weeks, and when you get no sun, solar panels don't do you much good. So eventually the batteries get kind of behind and you gotta catch them up. I think, based on my past experience, the camera picks up the generator noise much louder than I actually hear it. It's not that annoying at all, and no, I do not run it every day. I do not run it all the time. It's just something that you do have to do every now and then when you've got a small solar system. And I know I could have more batteries and I could have a bigger system, but I have a tiny house and there's only so much space for everything. So anyway, that's the background noise. If you, as you're looking through these herbs, think, I've never used tarragon, or this is rosemary I'm doing right now, or purple basil, or whatever, and I wouldn't even know what to do with them if I have them. If you guys are interested in cooking, which is something I always try to encourage, I've got a post on my blog. I'll link to that for everybody. It's kind of a good list. I didn't originate the list. I've kind of compiled it from some other people's lists, and it was something that my mom always had on the back of the spice cabinet door when I was growing up, of what spices go well with particular things. So it'll say, like, if you're cooking something with tomatoes, all these different spices taste good with tomatoes, or if you're cooking beef, or if you're cooking chicken, or whatever. It's just helpful. It's a good place to start if you want to experiment and think, that's something I never heard of. Let's see what other people think it tastes good with, and give it a try. That is rosemary. I tend to mostly use that actually with some poultry dishes and a fish chowder I make. That's when I kind of leave in bigger chunks and don't make totally fine, because that is going to often be something that you use to flavor and don't actually eat the whole thing. This is oregano. Kind of do make a little bit of a mess when you're doing operations like this in a tiny house. But again, things on bigger stems here, kind of, it's all nice and brittle dry. I can just kind of go down each stem and crush off all the leaves. So there might be a better system for doing this, but for my little operation, when I do this like one day out of the year when it's raining, this setup works for me. It doesn't require any additional tools, and I get most of the herbs that I need to use for the next year, which is great. And then I make some crumbs on the floor and just sweep them up into the compost bucket as well. So anyway, that is how I do my dried herbs, since a couple of you guys asked. Hopefully that's helpful if you need some ideas. If you don't have snow yet in your locations, I know most of the country doesn't yet, and you've got any of these herbs growing, go pick a couple and dry them and do this and use them in some of your cooking. They just add a lot of amazing flavor and extra nutrition to all kinds of things. This is how I get the herbs I use for, not that you couldn't buy them at the grocery store, but this is how I get the herbs I use for making that gluten and dairy-free ranch dressing that I shared in another video. I'll link to that down below. And anyway, that's my herb operation. Hope you guys are enjoying the weather wherever you are. I don't know if it's rainy the whole way across the country right now or not. Or maybe snow if you're one of the more northerly watchers. But thanks for checking it out, guys. Good to see ya.